So we're now in principle 9 with Hashem's loving grace. We're now learning principle 9 of our 13 principles of Emuna. I believe with complete belief that this is the Torah. It shall not be replaced, nor will the Creator, blessed be He, give us a different Torah. This is so significant, and we'll see how this is so relevant to what's happening in the world this very moment. Okay, so what is the 9th principle? 9th principle is the belief that the Torah we have today in our hands, this is the Torah for prosperity. Two things, it's unchangeable and it's irreplaceable. Not only do we not replace it, but the Torah we have can't change it. We can't change a single letter, and this is relevant for posterity. Why is it so relevant? The Zohar, in several places, I think offhand, at least 10 places, and I know maybe more, a dozen places. The Zohar says this all the time, beginning with the Zohar and Bereshis, that Hashem looked in the Torah and created the world. That the Torah, Hashem wrote the Torah way before Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were alive, but they knew he was going to create a world with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and 12 tribes. Hashem wrote the Torah way before. 974 generations before he created the world. Okay. King David alludes to this in Psalm 90 when he says, before the mountains were created, B'terem harim yuladu. He says in Psalm 90, he refers to the fact that King David, of course, knew this very well. King David not only was that Mashiach, not only was king of Israel, he was also a prophet. He was one of our 48 prophets. And King David knew that Hashem wrote the Torah way before the world. At 974 generations to be exact. And ultimately, the Torah was the blueprint that Hashem used to create the world. And we're going to see this tonight. You're going to see some amazing things tonight, I promise you. Okay? You're going to see how the COVID vaccine, it comes right out of the Torah. All right? People, there's a lot of things. Everything we have comes right out of the Torah. Next week, we are going to be talking about, in Principle 10, we'll be talking about, and Principle 11, we'll be talking about reward and punishment. We're going to elaborate a lot more on reward and punishment. Really, in Torah, there's no reward and punishment. It's cause and effect. It's cause and effect. If a person drinks kerosene, he's going to be sick. If he stays alive, he's going to be sick. That's not because he's getting punished. It's cause and effect. And if a person drinks fresh squeezed orange juice, he's going to improve his immune system because of the vitamin C there. This is not a reward for drinking orange juice. This is cause and effect. Same thing with the Torah has with seemingly. The Torah talks in terms of reward and punishment. It's cause and effect. Okay, so through the principles we've already learned that Hashem is truth and His Torah truth all over. See that all through the Torah. Since the entire universe and everything in it, from, as we said in our very first lesson, from the greatest macro, the super galaxies, to the tiniest micro, splitting of an atom, okay, it's all according to Hashem's Torah and all according to Hashem's will. Okay, next week we're going to be learning about the divine providence and Principle 10. But really the 13 principles are connected. But I try to stay focused on the principle we're learning so and not to be confused. So there's one thing we want to mention about the 9th principle, that the Torah is not only the blueprint of creation, the Torah is the sustenance of creation. Because since the Torah is the blueprint of creation, everything creation goes according to the Torah, then the underlying wisdom of creation for posterity can be found in the Torah. I want to see this. I mentioned the vaccines. We'll see how this works. But let's see right now. Look right now. I'm going to stop the world. Look what's happening in the UK, in the United States, and in Israel. Okay, politically, in all three countries, there's chaos. Less in the UK, more in Israel, and outright chaos in the United States. I don't know what's going on in the Senate right now, but right now, they say that the current president is not going to recognize the incoming president, and maybe the revolt of Senate. Topsy-turvy, the whole world. In Israel, there's 4 elections. They're about to have the 4th election in Israel, and they said there's nothing different. In the 5th election, nobody can run the country. The country here, as far as administrative, it's chaos. And now in the third lockdown, just tomorrow night at midnight, Israel goes into total lockdown again. That nobody leaves the house except to go to get food or medicine or whatever. See what's happening. when countries around the world have declared, we've defeated COVID. Ooh. If you go back on Emuna beams and go in the categories and look at COVID and listen to the podcast we made about COVID, that corona is Latin for crown. Crown in Kabbalah is Keter. That's the highest level of divinity. This is where it comes from. And this is cause and effect because the world has become so liberal, so crazy, so against Torah, so against Torah. So the world has punished itself. That's brought this virus into the world. And now they think that they solve it. Now you have the mutation, the UK mutation. It's crazy in the UK. And a few people came from Britain to Israel and they weren't quarantined. Now it's like wildfire in Israel, wildfire. And it's 1,000 people. You know, here in the UK, the most civilized country on earth, and they don't know what to do with the COVID. Now, if that's a problem, in South Africa, there's another mutation. In Australia, there is a third mutation that they say none of the vaccines don't affect. Okay, so everybody is really being careful about people coming out of Australia. And Israel, I don't know if Israel is about to close its airspace, but not let anyone in and not let anyone out unless it's some kind of dire thing. But this is, you see what Hashem, you can't fool Hashem. You can't fool Hashem. So person, what do you want to do to be healthy? And this is just an aside, but our practical, this is practical Emuna. If you want to do to be healthy, first thing, don't say bad words about anybody. Don't speak badly. Don't speak badly about anyone. Because everyone else is Hashem's creation. You don't speak about Hashem's creations. And you do what you can to observe the laws of Torah, and particularly the 10 Commandments. Don't go over 10. Don't follow 10 Commandments. Don't cheat a person in business. You think you're getting away with more money? No. What you do is a person that takes 1 cent that doesn't belong to him or her is lowering his or her spiritual immune system. There is a spiritual immune system because the spiritual immune system is connected to the bodily immune system. And if, heaven forbid, a person transgresses Torah, he opens himself to disease, okay, and all kinds. And disease can also be financial loss. Disease can be your car breaking down. Disease can be your washing machine going up in smoke when it's a brand new washing machine, all right? So this is what Hashem is encouraging. Why is Hashem doing this? It used to be that Hashem let things look more natural. But anyone with eyes in their head, look what's going on. Look at the chaos. Compare. Wait a second. Israel. And the same exact thing in the United States. And the UK. Look around the world what's happening. South Africa, Australia. Look around the world. Open our eyes. Not be isolationists. We're all in a little froggy corner in our own little, like the little frog in his puddle. He doesn't care. This is the whole universe. Have to look. And this is what Isaiah the prophet tells us on the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, Ami Lui Bunan. What Hashem's complaint is not that we don't observe. Hashem sends all these messages and people ignore them. Okay, don't ignore them. Because what's happening is it's the blueprint of creation. All right, so what's the connection between vaccine, immunization, and Torah? I'm sure everybody's heard of Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur was born in 1822 and he died in 1895. The French call him the father of microbiology. Many people around the world call him the father of microbiology. Louis Pasteur was a great scientist, but he's known best for his revolutionary findings in cause and preventing of disease. You know, Louis Pasteur, he's a microbiologist, and he knew that by boiling wine or by boiling water or by boiling vinegar, you'd preserve the shelf life, and because that kills the bacteria in it, the unwanted bacteria, and that's called pasteurization, named after Louis Pasteur. But Louis Pasteur did something else. Before Louis Pasteur came on the scene, rabies and anthrax were terrible, terrible, terrible diseases. Anthrax killed whole herds of cattle around the world. And rabies, rabid dogs, you can't even, a person's worst enemy shouldn't be with rabies. So Louis Pasteur, he owes his monumental work in the development of vaccines against these terrible diseases to Talmudic knowledge. And the Talmudic knowledge came over 15 centuries before he was born, and only 15 centuries back then, but they came even 15 centuries before that from Hashem to Moses on Mount Sinai, because the Talmud describes how a weak form of a disease, when it's administered to humans, it creates an immunity against the more violent version of that disease. And where did Louis Pasteur learn from? Okay, we had in Lithuania, there was Dr. Yisroel Michal Rabinovitz. Dr. Yisroel Michal Rabinovitz was son after son of a lineage of great, great rabbis. Okay, but he had a deep thinker, and he knew the Talmud like the back of his hand, but he wanted to know more. He wanted to see if the nations knew something that he didn't know. So he left Lithuania and he went to Paris to learn medicine. So here he is. He grew up in a shtetl, learned Talmud, but they saw who he was, accepted to medical school. He learned French very quickly because a brilliant, brilliant mind. And he became an MD in 1865. But he didn't practice medicine in Paris. What he did, he translated the Talmud to French. The French translation, I don't know if he'd succeed in Old Talmud, but I know the Seder of Moed, the Seder about Yom Tovim, he succeeded in translating. Okay, so he was a very intellectual, and his friends were intellectuals. He became best friends with Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur and Rabbi Dr. Yisroel Michal Rabinowitz became best friends. Okay, so they talk. So Louis Pasteur was intrigued into the Talmudic knowledge because all knowledge. So when they were living in Paris, they're both living in Paris, had lots of discussions about science and medicine. Okay, so Rabbi Rabinowitz said to Louis Pasteur, I'll give you part of my translation that deals with science and medicine. I'm sure this will interest you. So what he did, he gave him his translation of Tractate Yuma. Tractate Yuma on page 83b, it really grabbed Pasteur's attention because our sages in Tractate Yuma, let's talk about veterinary medicine, our sages in Tractate Yuma describe the 5 signs of a rabid dog. It's very practical to know because if you ever walk down the street, you see a dog, a stray dog, with these signs, get out of the way. It's got droopy ears, it's got a droopy tail, it kind of an abnormal gait, walks on the side of the road, and the Gemara gives these signs, okay? But there was something that was even more that grabbed Pasteur's curiosity. The cure that the Gemara says. The Gemara says, if you have a person that was bitten by a rabid dog, have to catch the dog, slaughter the dog, cook the dog's liver, and then feed the person with the rabies the liver of the dog. And he was thinking about that, Pasteur. So wait a second, what's behind here? And then he asked Rabbi Rabinowitz, he said, wait a second, dog is not just Pasteur, he's a bright guy. Dog's not a kosher animal. And Rabbi Rabinowitz explained to him that if someone's life is in danger, he may take a medicine that's not kosher. We learned several weeks ago that there are 3 violations of Torah that one person may not do to save a life. You can't do idolatry to save a life. You can't bow down to an idol. You can't spill another person's blood to save life. The Gemara says one person's blood is not any more red than another person's blood. And you can't be involved in illicit sexual relations to save a life. Like if somebody comes to a woman, okay, if you don't give it to me, then I'm going to die. Okay, die. The Gemara says, don't go die. Okay, go die. We don't do that. Okay, but everything else, a person is allowed to eat the meat of an unkosher animal. Okay, so here the Gemara says, you take the liver of the dog, you cook the dog, and you administer it to the person. So Pasteur was thinking, wait a second, what is the Gemara telling us? Okay, Gemara says, well, it looks like that if you take a small amount of an infection and you administer into a body, whether it's a bird body or an animal body or a human body, then it will trigger the body's immune system to get to know this invading organism that's not part of the body. The body, in its magnificent wisdom that Hashem put in the body, of the immune system, the body builds immunity to it. And then if the organism attacks full scale, the body knows how to fight it off. So what did Louis Pasteur do? He did something super interesting. He had a flock of chickens. He went to a flock of chickens that in France that had cholera. There's fowl cholera, okay? Fowl cholera, I'm going to give the symptoms. But he took one of these chickens that had cholera, and then he took 10 healthy chickens and put them in a closed-up coop. He cooked the fowl with the cholera, and he took the chicken soup from the cholera chicken and made a vaccination, and then he injected it into the healthy chickens. Okay. Then he took the healthy chickens and put them with chickens with cholera, and they didn't get cholera. So it's amazing. Okay, so then by the basis of this knowledge, he went on and he made 3 major vaccinations that worked. He made a vaccination against cholera for humans, a vaccination against anthrax, both for humans and cattle, and a vaccination against rabies, both for dogs and for humans. Fantastic. It all started from the wisdom of the Torah, the wisdom of the Torah. This is the wisdom that Hashem gave Moses, and Moses passed this on down, and it was gradually revealed by generations of rabbis. And that's why you see all the time in the oral Torah, they say, where do you learn this from? Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. We say in Torah learning, okay, halam, it's hey lamed mem. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Okay, everything. This is what Hashem told Moses on Sinai. This is what Hashem told. Somebody says, you got a source from this? It's okay. But a person has to say, if he has this is a reasoning, or is he has a Masorah? There's a different weight in Talmud, but someone says, well, you could deduction or induction, or no, I have a Masorah generation after generation, what Hashem told Moses. Okay, so therefore, we are so careful about what Hashem gave to Moses on Sinai, that in our 9th principle, there are no additions and no detractions. Nobody can come in and say, oh, Hashem told Moses that you can close the Gemara to watch the World Cup football game. No, you can't watch UK play Argentina on Yom Kippur. No, that's not allowed. Somebody can think that is allowed. You can't do that. Also, you can't watch the World Series baseball game on Rosh Hashanah. That's not allowed. Even if somebody comes along and explains a prophet, no additions, no subtractions. Now, the Rambam, who codified our 13 principles, Maimonides, he stresses that by virtue of the Torah's divine origin, that was all given as Moses, as we learned last week at Principle 8, nothing may be added and nothing may be detracted, neither from the oral Torah, neither from the written Torah. Okay, so the Kamarna Rebbe was a holy Rebbe, the Kabbalist and Torah scholar, as Rabbi Isaac Yehuda Yechiel Safran. He lived at the same time as Rabbi Natan of Breslov. This is between 1806 and 1874. And the Kamarna Rebbe, he wrote a commentary on Torah. It's called Heichal Bracha, the Hall of Blessing. Okay, and in Parshas Bereishis, he writes it like this. He says, the Rambam, in his holy tongue, teaches that our Torah comes directly from the Creator, blessed be He, and not from anyone else. And we may therefore neither attract nor detract from the written Torah or the oral Torah, because the Torah itself commands us, and you shall neither add nor detract. What does it mean, not add or detract? You don't put 2 mezuzahs on your door. You don't put 5 parshas inside your tefillin. There's only 4 parshas. And no additions, no detractions. Okay, so we learned, and the Kamarna Rebbe stresses that in our 8th principle of Emuna, that Moses did not add or detract a single word of Torah. Now, if you remember, Korach accused him of it, and Moses says, if you think it comes from me and not from them, then you're going to die. You're not going to die a natural death. If you think I invented something. And we saw what happened to Korah right there, right then and there. The ground swallowed him up and all his henchmen that revolted against Moses. Korah, he didn't believe in that Moses' prophecy was true. We spoke about that last week. But it is all, whether the Torah, and then not only is Shema Yisrael true, not only is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, not only the 10 Commandments true, but when the Torah says something seemingly mundane, that Timnah was Lotan's sister, just as we can't change the first commandment and the second commandment, 10 of the 10 commandments, we can't change that Timnah was Lotan's sister, something that was very mundane in the Torah, because the entire oral Torah, the entire written Torah was given to Moses, and that's passed down from generation to generation. So the Kamarna Rebbe completes and continues, and he says that the Torah can neither be replaced nor rescinded For in essence, it's our belief, and this is according to Kabbalah, that the Torah is all a collection of Hashem's names. And that's why you see the people that work on the Torah codes. Deep, so many secrets in Torah, so many secrets in Torah. It's amazing. It could be nothing other than divine. In our second lesson, talked about the shapes. This week's Torah portion, Shemot, where Hashem says, "I am that I am." And I explain how I am that I am in numerical value is truth. Ekia Hashem Ekia, 21 times 21, translating to numbers, 441. 441 is Emet. Taf is a 400, Mem is 40, and Aleph is 1. For what Hashem says, but his name is truth. And therefore, we learn in the Talmud that Hashem's signet ring is truth, because 99% truth, it's 100% lie. The moment you have the slightest counterfeit, then it can't be true anymore. Okay, so in light of everything that we're learning, okay, and one thing we know, the closer we get to Mashiach, more and more and more inner secrets of Torah are going to be revealed. Okay, Hashem is revealing inner secrets of Torah. It's just like for the time of the vaccination, that was a secret of Torah that wasn't revealed until Pasteur's time. But there are more and more secrets. We're going to see next week. You see, next week, anybody believe that Google search is in the Torah? Next week, we're going to see the Google search in the Torah. Search engines, right from the Torah. Divine providence. It's crazy. The people that run to learn high tech, I don't suggest to learn high tech, because a high tech manual is good for 6 months maximum. That's a good high tech manual. 6 months, after 6 months, you'd send it to the shredder. And you know what happens to shredded paper? It becomes litter in the chicken coops. Okay, that saves money on sawdust. Okay, the Torah still here and still alive. Torah is for posterity. We learn Torah, we learn knowledge that's always with us, always with us. And people and I didn't know how to think. The Torah, you learn how to think. You learn how to think. That there were young men that have learned in yeshiva, and they've gone in and they finished law school in less than a year. Right? The people that take 3 or 4 years in a law course, because difference between university and yeshiva, I know I've got experience in both. Learned, spent a lot of time in university and a lot of time in yeshiva. And university, you don't learn to think, you learn to memorize. You learn to memorize. Anybody, it doesn't matter what you learned. And I was fortunate enough to learn applied science. I learned agriculture, an agriculture student. And even though, Baruch Hashem, I'm glad I learned applied science and not philosophy or something totally useless. But in Torah, you learn to think. In Torah, you learn to reason. In Torah, you learn to analyze. And it's the Torah mind, it's something completely different, because this is the light of Hashem. When you activate your mind with the light of Hashem and not with the light of flesh and blood, today's theories, take whatever secular discipline, take psychology. Whatever it did today, one theory's a thing. It used to be that Freud, then Freud was Skinner, then Skinner Gestalt, then Gestalt someone else, and it's all different things. Not in Torah. Not in Torah. Torah doesn't change. Okay, and this is why we wait for the day. One of the things that the more we get closer to Mashiach, and once Mashiach comes, and the whole world is going to fill with hunger for Torah and spiritual awareness. Okay, so in light of what we learn now this is something very, very important. People say, well, how come Jews don't recognize Islam or Christianity? Okay, we're not going to mix things. We just say it as they are. We respect everyone, but why we don't believe in it? Because it's not true. In light of everything we've learned, if someone comes along with a claim of a new Torah or a new prophecy, after the age of prophecies, that's it. The last prophet, as we said 2 lessons ago, were Esther and Mordechai. Esther and Mordechai, they closed the Tanakh. That's it. After that, no one comes in, no one comes out. Okay. So now, Judaism never accepted Christianity's false claims, because their testament denies many laws of Torah. Not only are they Johnny-come-lately, they're way, way afterward. But if you look in, I don't suggest anybody look in there, but if you ask my esteemed friend, Rabbi Tovia Singer, he's a expert on this. He's an expert in comparative religion and how to answer the missionaries and whatnot. Anyways, I don't waste time on that because I only learn pure Emuna. I let Rabbi Tuvia involve himself in that. Okay, but if you look in their books, they talk about our laws. What do we say about our laws? Eitz Chaim hi lemachzikim ba, v'tomcha moshal, that our Torah is a tree of life, and it brings happiness. And King David says, Pudi Hashem yeshalim b'samchei lev, that the laws of Torah are happy, they gladden the heart. What's not happy about not talking evil about anyone, about not taking a scent that doesn't belong to you, about doing loving kindness for other people? New Testament comes along, and New Testament says that all the Torah's laws are stern judgments, and the New Testament comes along and it throws up, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that, and takes the Sabbath laws, tramples them, they don't do, even change the day of the Sabbath completely. This is the 10 Commandments. People don't realize that. They say, oh, the Judeo-Christian. There's no such thing as Judeo-Christian. If it's Christian, it's not Judeo. Okay, if it take the 10 Commandments, take the 10 Commandments, that's saying the elephant alligator theory, that you can't cross an elephant with an alligator. No, elephant's an elephant, alligator's an alligator. Okay, so here's the thing, you can't, and they come along, this so goes against the grain of everything in our ninth principle. Not our ninth principle, I'm talking only about the ninth principle, all the other principles. Okay, talk about 10 Commandments. I can see, recognize the 10 Commandments. You take the Sabbath laws and boom, that's it, change the day of the Sabbath. Okay, so the Christians decide the Sabbath is Sunday. The Muslims decide the Sabbath is Friday. It's very interesting. Within the Muslims, there are people in Afghanistan and in Pakistan that retain Hebrew names and retain the Saturday Shabbat and retain many things like that. They just never accepted all of that. They became Islam in part, but they held on to this. Okay, and so we say the Christian prophecy, unquote, where that one man comes along and says that he's seen the light and he's got 10 or 12 disciples. That came 500 years after Esther and Mordecai. Okay, now once again, where does our comes in? We're the only people that had 2 million people not see, but Hashem, and see and hear Hashem. And this is father to son, father to son, father to son, rabbi to pupil, mother to daughter, and back to Mount Sinai, because we were all there. So a person says, oh, I'm going to change things. He thrown away his entire thing. We have an unbroken chain, This week, we had my family had a Zoom reunion. My family is all over the world, whatnot, and they asked me to give the chain of our lineage. We go back lineage, and boom, 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 all the way back to King David, to Judah. This came from the side of dad, we're from Judah. Mom was a Levi. From the side of mom, we come from the Levim, and goes back to trace it. That's for Jews, no problem. No problem at all. Okay, the same thing, and it's even easier for a rabbi and a student. All right, so we talked about that. That's Christianity. Islam, that's even later. Muhammad's prophecy was a nuance of 1,300 years ago. All right, now look at the difference between Christianity and Islam and in Judaism. Nobody ever beat anybody up to practice Judaism. Don't have to. I have to hit somebody in the face or threaten them with a knife or a sword or a gun. No, he heard it on Mount Sinai. His neshama heard it on Mount Sinai. His parents heard it, the grandparents, the great-grandparents. Not so in our neighboring religions. So they come, the Crusades went across Northern Europe, beginning in the UK. Okay, beginning in the UK, first kicked the Jews out of Britain, which they did, then go to France and kill all the Jews in France, then go on the way to the Middle East, your war with Saladin, the pogroms way back then, and then, okay, that's just not the Crusaders. So we fast forward, and French, the Spanish Inquisition, kill all the Jews. What did Muhammad do? Muhammad came, and in the destruction of the Second Temple of the survivors, some went to Babylon, which is today's Iraq. Some were there after the destruction of the First Temple, but some went south. there was a vibrant Jewish community in Saudi Arabia and in Yemen. The Yemenites stayed there. The Yemenites are maybe the most preserved group of Jews since the Second Temple, because they didn't mix in with anybody. They never assimilated with anything. That's one thing. There was no assimilation in Yemen. Okay. But when Muhammad went to Saudi Arabia, and Muhammad, that was his home turf, and said to the Jewish communities there, I'm your new Messiah. I'm your new prophet. I'm your new prophet, and here's my book, the Quran. They had their principle. No, we don't change anything. We never heard of you, sir. Oh, no? Okay, so by the sword. You see Muhammad's Khyber Wars, where he killed, massacred the Jews of Saudi Arabia. There was a Holocaust in Saudi Arabia in the 7th and 8th centuries. Thank you, Professor Muhammad. Okay, thank you, Quran. Okay, Quran, it's Obama used to say it's a peaceful religion. Study history, sir. Okay, it's not. So you see here, why do they have to kill by the sword? And why do they have to kill by the sword? We don't need to kill by the sword. Do you need to kill somebody with a sword and say, hey, look at the sun and look at the blue sky. What color is the sky? Oh, it's blue. You don't have to force somebody to expect it. But if a person is a despot or a person is a tyrant, then he has to force himself with the might of his hand. Okay, so this is Christianity and Islam throughout history reverted to the sword, and our people, unfortunately, were on the wrong side of that sword. Why? Because we didn't fall into their nuances. We preferred to give our life, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and not sacrifice one iota of Torah. Okay, so the Jewish people, they would say, your sword is not going to convince me that I didn't hear what I heard on Mount Sinai. Okay, so therefore, we say, in Osher Ad, Osher Ad's a supermarket chain in Israel, and they have a advertising gimmick. It says, no tricks and no shticks. Okay, no tricks and no shticks. Shtick in Yiddish is gimmicks. Okay, so I say our Torah, the Rambam, principle 9 is no tricks and no shticks. You say, no tricks and no shticks. Okay, the Rambam, has Christianity and Islam in mind when he writes. Listen to what the Rambam says. He writes this in the Foundations of Torah. If you look at the chapter 9 of the Foundations of Torah, in the beginning of the Rambam, the first section, the 14 sections of the Rambam. The Rambam says, if a person arises, this is my translation of the Rambam, if a person arises, whether from Israel or from the nations, and performs some wonder or miracle, and claims that Hashem sent him to add or detract the commandment of Torah, or he interprets in a Torah in a manner that contradicts Moses and contradicts the prophecy of Moses, or he tells us that a commandment of Torah is no longer relevant, it's not eternal but antiquated, okay, then he's a false prophet. And so what can happen? What does this mean? False prophet, all right? If a person says that anything in the Torah is irrelevant, false prophet. Don't know. He's changed it. This is his own agenda. He wants to be elected. Like somebody wants to take an election by force. Okay, this is what you taking the world opinion by force and forcing people to believe in him. Okay, but you can't force, because that's forcing. That's a trick. And that's shtick. So what's a trick? Person come along and walk on the water. Can walk on the water. Go look at YouTube and see how people walk on the water. They use plexiglass. And somebody crossed the Thames, walked on the water. And they even wanted to prove their trick, and they brought the British naval police, and London's got naval police that go around in boats up the rivers. They patrol the rivers and the waterways, a lot of waterways around London. Okay, and to show that this was no trick, because the boat was right near there. But then the guy showed himself on YouTube. He said he made a lot of money on that. He showed about the plexiglass he was walking on. Okay, there's all kinds of tricks. And the person gets a sounded light show. Point is 5 fingers, and he's got lasers coming out of his 5 fingers, fingertips, and so that sounded light show. And another person comes along and pulls a rabbit out of a hat, and it can be chemistry or alchemistry and witchcraft. I'll tell you something that really works. There is a manipulation of Hashem's names that a person can also do miracles. But if this is not done in holiness, it's done from the dark side. In other words, there are dark side miracles. I don't want to go into this, but there are dark side miracles. You could do dark side miracles. Such a phenomenon is possible, Okay, even the Torah talks about it. All right, but that's shtick. That's gimmick. Okay, and the Torah is no shtick or no gimmick. So it doesn't matter how impressive or how supernatural this miracle guy is. If he comes and detracts a single letter of Torah, adds or detracts, it's false prophet. Not only not belief in him, but not such a nice penalty in Torah for a false prophet. Okay, so now there are many what's called meforsamim sheker. It is an saying that Rebbe Nachman of Breslov uses. Meforsam sheker. Meforsam means false and famous. Right now, false and famous. You see all kinds of people again, the Kabbalists. Kabbalists coming out of the rain. Kabbalists, and you send him $500, and you get your little red Kabbalah string to wrap around your wrist. Don't wear a red string around your wrist. Red is the color of stern judgment. I see people, these little red strings. Where'd you get that? Oh, the Kabbalist told me. What? It brings stern judgments. Don't wear little red strings. You don't do that. Let's say another kapitel of Tehillim. Say another verse of Psalms. Okay. But our generation's been plagued by that. The generation is so hungry for Mashiach that it's gullible and it wants to believe that something comes along. So people take advantage of this. They take advantage of this. And one thing, when a person tells you, there's two ways to recognize this falsehood. When a person has his hand in your pocket, number one, and when he says, oh, no, you don't need to do so hard. You don't need to be too tshuva. You don't need to be principle. Just you pay me and I'll make a blessing for you and I'll do this. And, you don't have to go to synagogue. You don't have to make tshuva. Yes, you do. You do have to make tshuva. Yes, you do. Okay. Yom Kippur is only good for if you make tshuva. We have to do tshuva every single day. So there are people that claim to be Kabbalists, that they're privy to the esoteric secrets of Torah. But the common denominator between the false and the famous is they too lack a Masorah. Ask this guy who you never heard of, and all of a sudden they call him the ultrasound, and they got all these names for the thing because he thinks excuse me, sir, who was your teacher? If he tells you his teacher was Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, and he's got proof of it. If he tells you his teacher was Rabbi Kaduri, and Rabbi Kaduri teacher, Ben Ish Chai, and go back, and he's part of the Iraqi Kabbalah. Okay, that's fine. The guy's got credentials. He's got credentials. But it comes up, Joe Schmo, and yesterday he was a cab driver, and tells him, I'm a hidden tzaddik. Well, if he's a hidden tzaddik, he's going to remain hidden. He's not going to let you tell about it. There are 36 hidden tzaddikim around, but they're not going to tell you about it. And it's not their rating. Okay, the top 10. Who's top 10? Like you have in the British Football League. Okay, who's number one? Who's number two? Manchester, the Red Devils of Manchester, or whatever they are, and then Coventry, and then Manchester United. No, it's not the league. It's not a league of hidden Kabbalists. If someone is a hidden Kabbalist, he's hidden, and nobody knows about him. There are people that are deeply immersed in Kabbalah, and you look at them, they're most normal. They're not asking for money. They're not teaching. They're not rolling their eyes up in the air. Okay. So you have to be very, very careful because they're not authentic. And this is what Rabbi Nachman of Breslov warned, that in the generation before Mashiach, we'd have all these false leaders, and it doesn't matter how sought after they are. And you see they've got all these followers. Again, and these are the words of Rabbi Natan of Breslov writes about this in Likutei Halachot, in the Laws of Cholamoid, chapter 4, Halacha 4, that he calls them soothsayers that purvey false beliefs. So the false and famous, how do you recognize them? Okay, sometimes they're difficult to recognize because so many people are following them, all right, and often zealously. But you see people zealously that, again, they act like the Islams and the Christians, that they want to force other people. They want to force you to believe in their guy. Force you to believe. Don't force me to believe in a rabbi. Okay, it's not a military unit, and you got a uniform, and everybody has to wear your uniform, has to do like you and act like you, and if you don't do like what they're not the real deal. Not the real deal. Because here's the thing, and here is the expose. If the leader tells his followers to perform a violent act or to speak, not even a violent, to speak against someone that opposes them, guy's a falsie, he's finished, it's not the real deal. Because he's breaking Torah. He's breaking Torah. You're not allowed to lift a finger against anyone. Not only that, this week's Parsha, Dathan and Aviram were threatening each other. Hey, I'm going to bash you. Moses said, Russia, evil one, why do you intend to hit your friend? Before he even hit them, he just threatened him. A threat in Judaism is against the Torah. Okay, a threat in Judaism is called onat dvarim. It falls under the category of verbal abuse. Verbal abuse is against Torah. Physical abuse, no doubt about it. Okay, but verbal abuse. So you can see that if this rabbi or this quote rabbi or this pseudo Kabbalist or counterfeit Rebbe tells an individual that there's a law of Torah that they don't need to do, oh, you don't need to eat kosher, you don't need to eat Shabbat, you don't need to make tshuva. He says you don't need to make tshuva. That's not saying you don't need to keep Shabbat, you don't need to eat kosher. If he cancels a law of Torah, he's not the real deal. Because a real rabbi, okay, he won't tell you to change overnight, but he'll say, listen, this is what the Torah demands of you. We got to work our way into it. In other words, we don't tell a person to change overnight, but little by little, okay? You can't kosher your kitchen overnight, but first, stop eating the pork. Okay, let's make a plan. First, stop eating the pork. Then stop making the milk and the meat. And now we kosher the dishes. One by one, we make slow, steady gain. We don't jump overboard. But a real rabbi, no discounts. There's no discounts in the 613 mitzvahs of Torah, right? So these are why any so-called spiritual guide, he can't be true if he deviates one iota of Torah. So once again, the first thing you need to check, if you have a spiritual guide or somebody you believe in, who ordained him? Who's his rabbi? Who does he ask when he doesn't know something? Where does he get his Masorah from? Where did it come from? These are all legitimate questions that an intelligent, responsible person, not only Jew, but Noahide, responsible person must ask himself. Must ask the questions. I get unbelievable questions from Noahides. Really sharpen it. Must I keep this or must I keep this? And really, there's the Noahide, their mitzvahs, no discount. No discount. Sorry, if you talk about personal holiness and things like adultery, heaven forbid, things like dishonesty in commerce. A Noahide too, just like a Jew, he can't touch 1 cent of somebody else's money. Okay, they're very, very serious. But somebody says, "Oh, this is okay, this is fine." He wants a nice contribution from the guy. It's okay. I'm sorry that I'm killing business for certain people, but okay, we're talking about truth of Torah. Truth of Torah. Okay, truth of Torah. Torah doesn't have a price tag, and if it is a price tag, it's a spiritual price tag. Hashem wants our heart, and Hashem wants our mitzvahs, and Hashem wants us learning His Torah and doing the mitzvahs. Okay, so something a lot of people want to ask me about. I'm anticipating a question, Mashiach. Okay, Mashiach and posterity. What's going to happen to our ninth principle when Mashiach comes? We said Torah, this is our Torah, it's not going to be changed, it's not going to be replaced. When people think, oh, wait for Mashiach, we have it great, be able to go on my speedboat in Shabbat. No, you won't be able to go on your speed, you won't be water skiing on Shabbat. Mashiach will not let you go water skiing on Shabbat. Mashiach will not let you go to the football game on Shabbat either. Okay, so people say, what's it's going to be Mashiach status, all right? In the Gemara Tractate Megillah, it says these laws are never going to be nullified. The Gemara in Tractate Megillah says the ninth principle straight out. Okay, what's Mashiach going to do? He's going to elaborate on the Torah, and he's going to spread knowledge and awareness of Torah, especially Emuna. In other words, for us, that we're learning together, these are already messianic times. You know what we're doing? We're doing what Mashiach is going to do with us. Okay? When Mashiach comes, there's going to be a big Mashiach Zoom lesson, and Mashiach is going to be teaching the principles of Emuna to the whole world. Okay? And everybody that's in here, you know what your job is going to be when Mashiach comes? Oh, you've already learned the principles? Now each one of you, but each one of you is going to be the head of a yeshiva, head of a seminary, and you're going to be teaching the principles to other people because Mashiach, they're going to be able to get them themselves, okay? So he's going to say, Barbara, you're going to have your students, and Alan, you're going to have your students, and Roberta, you're going to have your students, and the Blumenberg family have their students, and the Viva students, and every one of them. Every one of you can have your students, okay? So where do we learn this from? Prophet Isaiah in the 11th chapter says, Umala aretz das is Hashem, what's going to be with Mashiach, that the whole world will fill with knowledge of Hashem, just as the sea covers the land. The whole world, the knowledge of Hashem and the knowledge of Emuna is going to cover the earth. So since we get to know Hashem only by way of Torah, Hashem never changed his Torah because that's the only way to get to know him. Because as the Torah says in several places, this is the eternal law for all generations. This is the Torah. Okay, so the Torah, it's very economical with words. So why does the Torah say that in so many places, the eternal law for all the generations? The Torah says in quite a few different places, eternal law for generations, okay? That if it's eternal law, then it knows for all generations. But if we take a look at it, it's not really redundant. The answer is that no generation can say that Torah is irrelevant. Heaven forbid. And the high-tech generation, they can't say that. And generation of Mashiach can't say that. Nobody can say that. Because the Torah we have today is a Torah given to Moses, and that's a Torah to get us close to Hashem. So the wonderful aspect of Mashiach that we have to look forward to is what the Brisker Rov tells us. The Brisker Rov, Reb Yitzchak Zev, it's called the Grease. Ratio Zayin. Reb Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik, the Brisker Rov says that Mashiach will clarify Torah in such a way that it will be as if each of us learned straight from Eliyahu Navi, from Elijah the prophet. And Elijah the prophet is a forerunner of Mashiach. And that is what the prophet Malachi says in the 3rd chapter, verse 23. Behold, Hine Anochi Sholech Eliyahu Navi. Behold, I send you Eliyahu, the prophet, on the great and awesome day of Hashem. The great and awesome day of Hashem, when we see with our own eyes that Hashem reveals himself, brings down our holy temple in Yerushalayim, rebuilt holy temple, and rebuilt Yerushalayim, land of Israel, with ingathering exiles and Mashiach speedily in our days. Amen.